So, almost. Hello. There we are. Okay, good. So, a very good afternoon to each and every one of you. It's been a long day, a long conference. We're nearing the end of the COP28 conference, but it's a great pleasure to welcome you all here, where we are to look at the Ocean Stewardship Centers. We look at the role of these centers in building capacity in the Global South and in local communities, which is of course crucial for development. So I have a very distinguished panel here, a great panel with Patricia Furtado. You are head of a company called Aquamater, yes, and you're also the author of the Brazilian report, which will be presented. Then we have Rafael Tello, head of sustainability at the Ambipar Group, an environmental management company operating all over the world. We have Rubens, heading the oceans and water work at UN Global Compact. UNGC, for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's anchored, it's the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. It's anchored at the very top of the UN system. We have something like 26,000 companies and organizations as part of our membership. We're directly under the UN Secretary General, who is chairman of our board, and Sandor Jambo, who is executive director, is also assistant secretary general of the UN. And we have networks and national organizations in 70 countries all around the world, and Brazil is the largest one of these. So, second. Okay, second largest. One of the largest. Okay. Not for long. Okay, we are growing rapidly, and we have actually close to 700 people all around the world currently, and counting. And then, of course, Ruth Boumphrey, who is CEO of Lloyd's Register Foundation. I'd like to thank you very much, Ruth, for the excellent cooperation that we have, and for your generous support for the work that we're doing, and not least on the Ocean Stewardship Centers, which we will address now. So what we'll do is that I'll give a brief context to the discussion, and then we'll discuss further with the panelists. So let me kick off by saying that there will be no solution to the climate crisis, the nature crisis, and the development and prosperity of the world without the ocean. That is sort of the base and bottom line. The ocean, of course, covers 70% of the planet. It represents 90% of livable space on Earth. It absorbs a third of the greenhouse gas emissions emitted to the atmosphere. And it's sort of vital for all life on Earth, on our planet. So we need, as is stated in Sustainable Development Goal 14, we need clean, healthy, and productive oceans. But that is a necessary but not sufficient condition for progress. Concurrently, we need to massively scale up ocean industries. We need to produce more electricity from the ocean, more sustainable food from the ocean. We need to decarbonize shipping for logistics. We need to produce medicines. And we need to massively scale up ocean activities in a sustainable manner. And this, of course, this transition is also, and that is a precondition for achieving all of the 17 SDGs. Ocean is vital for that. It's a global common, so not least, for instance, SDGs 16 and 17, peace, justice, strong institutions, and cooperation for the goals, partnership for the goals, vital to succeed. Then, of course, this green and blue transition will offer a host of benefits and opportunities. But these will not be distributed equally by default. only by design, because the transition, the massive transition that we are undergoing now, can also, if not deliberately designed, can also serve to consolidate and increase inequalities, both within countries and not least between the global north and the global south. And this is why it's so imperative that the global north now and advanced and affluent countries are now understanding that they have to contribute. They cannot leave to the global south to shoulder the entire burdens of the historic emissions that we, from my country, for instance, Norway, have emitted. This has to be dealt with cooperatively, and the affluent and industrial countries have to contribute. Thirdly, this massive transition will affect all parts of society. This cannot be dealt with exclusively with technology, finance, and regulations. This is as much a people transition. It will affect every corner of society. It will not succeed if people do not see a better future beyond the green shift. And that has to be designed. That is something which means that people must support, embrace the green shift politically by their market behavior. And this is something which is also closely interlinked with the previous point, that it has to be just and fair. And last but not least, we have to make sure that the workforce is trained, upskilled, reskilled, and adapted to these new technologies and these new ways of operations. This is at the core of a project at the UNGC, which we call Maritime Just and Equitable Transition Project, aiming at sort of covering these aspects. But also, and closely interlinked with this, are the ocean stewardship centers, for which we are now establishing a number of centers in the global south and prominently also in Brazil, and generously sponsored and supported by Lloyd's Register Foundation. Because safety and sustainability are, which is of course at the core of your concerns, they are intrinsically interlinked. There will be no sustainable development if we do not have the safety at heart. And safety is not only about avoiding accidents. Safety is as much about making sure that people are taken well care of, that they are able to have a safety and predictability and security for their livelihoods, not least in local communities in the global south, where they are at the very forefront of the ocean economy, where very many are suffering from or challenged by precarious conditions, and where there is a wealth of knowledge. And we need to make sure that this knowledge, that we have country-specific and locally tailored solutions to develop this. And here we have a wealth of traditional knowledge, local knowledge to tap from, which will be at the core of these projects. But this will not happen if we do not have partnerships. And the partnerships are sort of at the core of what we are to discuss now. And to make sure that the local voices are heard, acknowledged, but also that they are brought into the global discussion on how we shall go about this transition. So with that, turning to you, Patricia, maybe you could give us, you've authored the country report for Brazil. Maybe you could give us sort of a glimpse of what were the challenges that you saw, and what is the potential for this transition in Brazil from your extensive work?
We used to say that when we have challenges, we have opportunities. And I think this is really true to Brazil. Talking about the report, it was, the beginning, a huge challenge because we had like 1 month to have this photograph about the reality of Brazil. And so we said, what will we do to collect as much information as possible to have this photograph that will guide the work of the working group on green shipping and green ports? So I would say that we have to be guided by intuition on how to do that. And so I would say it was a kind of the methodology, journalistic methodology to try to understand the challenges around from the scientific perspective, from the government perspective, but most of all, we had to listen to the people that were feeling the pains as we were talking, Ruth. So which were the specific challenges from the maritime sector? Those who are working in the ports industries, the terminals, and those who are working on the maritime sector. So I started to develop this report. The first thing was, okay, let's see what the main websites of the government, of scientific institutions are talking about these challenges we have to advance this agenda. But of course, it was not enough. So I started to interview people from these different sectors to listen to them. What were their feelings and what were their doubts, what were their certainties they had about which is the direction that we could have to move on. But it was not enough. We said, we don't have time, but we need to launch a survey to be addressed to those working in ports and those working in shipping, cargo and cruises, passengers, transportation as well. And that was, I think, the most important basis of information to guide us in our group. And the first thing we have noted, for example, that the ports, those who work on ports, public or private ports or terminals, they answered much more to this request. So we felt for them it was much more important to be engaged in that discussions because they are like desperate about this agenda. It's like we have to be prepared for all this transportation that will arrive in Brazil. We have a situation in Brazil, I think, as in different countries from the global south, most of the main transport companies, they are foreigners, those who are working with long distances. So it was very difficult to reach them because the central offices were not in Brazil. So it was so difficult to have information from them. So for example, this is already a challenge and a very important information. We didn't reach them. We didn't have almost any answer. Just one transport organization, Brazilian one, answered our survey. So it's already a scenario of the situation. And in Brazil, we have another challenge because most of the Brazilian organizations from transport, they are from cabotage. They work in the waterways, and they are not engaged in this agenda yet as the big transportations. So we see that in Brazil, the port sector is much more engaged, as I was saying before. Uh-oh, there's a music going on. It's okay. It's okay. But you know, and I think, but talking about challenges in general, we need to foster more cross-sector dialogue. And what I felt through this research is that we are not having enough communication between the port industry and the maritime transportation industry. And we need to promote maybe events or opportunities to listen to all of them together. And normally we say, ports are there, they're waiting to have the information about the transport companies, like which fuels will you use? Because we need to prepare the installations. We have to see if we have enough area here, maybe, to have the installations to hydrogen, to some fuels that need more space. So the challenges are huge, but I feel that that Brazil is really with this I couldn't say desire, but is really moving, want to be inside this agenda, looking for information from abroad. But talking about global south and global north, I would say that sometimes the solutions that are already being found for the global north, they're not exactly those who will fit for us. So it will be very important as a challenge to listen to the people who are there working, you know, with the big deals day by day, to see which are their pains, which could be the viable solutions. Because talking about the global south, and in Brazil, for example, we don't have specific policies or specific incentives to move on. So what to do? We have to listen more, we have to promote more and more dialogue, cross-sectorial dialogue, and global north, global south.
Thank you, Patricia. I think that what you're saying about the participation and the ports and the dilemma faced by the ports, I think it's very real. But I can tell you also how fast this has moved, because in my previous life, I was CEO of the Norwegian Shipowners Association, and only 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was sort of inconceivable to have deep sea shipping decarbonized. It was sort of, the common wisdom was that shipping was a carbon captive. Now, that is no longer sort of part of the discussion. But I think what you're pointing to is that we need sort of an industrial ecosystem approach to this. It cannot be solved by shipping alone. It cannot be solved by ports alone. It cannot be solved by regulations alone. And on that note, a segue to you, Rubens. What are the main challenges that you're facing in decarbonizing shipping in Brazil, and not least with respect to what Patricia is saying?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and the invitation is always a pleasure. Well, we've been working with this working group for just 6 months, so we are learning step by step, little by little. This wasn't something that we had in our minds, or we have worked like for years. No, we have been working for like 6 months. So what we have found out about the report that Patricia carried out, and all the conversations, all the workshops and the meetings that we had so far, we understood that the ports in Brazil are the ones who are more interested in becoming like green. Because, well, we have this huge challenge. We don't have like a strong maritime industry in Brazil like in the global north. So, yes, of course, we have some bulk carriers, we have some cargoes, but they are not so huge as like in Norway or Denmark or England or France or whatever. So the ports, they are more interested like in decarbonizing itself. So they are working, and well, it's a very important to understand that in Brazil, 99% of the ports are public owners, are public state owners. So this is very interesting because they lack of financial support, they lack of policies, they lack of standards. So we just have a one port that is privatized, so they are going faster than others. So what they are like doing, what they are working is creating a greener industry inside the ports. So this is what we are facing, what we are experiencing now in Brazil. They are more interested, for example, in exporting green steel or developing a fertile industry. Fertile, right? Fertile industry, right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know this in English, but that's why. Fertile. It's fertile, all right. Yeah. So they are more interested in those kind of things. But Sturla, to be very honest with you, I think the most challenge now for us, is to develop standards. We need to be very precise. You know, we have to adopt, for example, some standards that is happening in the EU. We have the IMO standards, but Brazil is not adopting them. And this is very worrying, right? We need to be very careful because we are not receiving any financial support, and there's no other laws, for example, that we can like follow and adopt. So this is actually one of the main reasons that we have developed this working group in Brazil, to help the government, but also to create a businesses standard for decarbonizing the industry. Not only the maritime and the ports, as you mentioned, but also the industries, like in general speaking.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, brief.
Very brief. For example, the ports, they are facing a huge difficulty now to make their inventory of emissions. For example, that's why what Rubens is bringing is very important. They have the GHG protocol, but they're quite lost on how doing that. So it's difficult to establish their goals because they don't know how to do it.
So this is, I think, this is not necessarily country-specific to Brazil, of course, but I think it sort of reflects a wider challenge, which is that only a few years ago, I think that shipping was considered to be a laggard in the decarbonization efforts. It's outside of the Paris Agreement, and as I said, perceived to be a carbon captive. But now, what we've seen in the last few years is that the industry itself actually is ahead of regulators. They have been impatient with IMO to make rules and regulations which can provide certainty for the massive investments that they are to do in new vessels. So in the absence of that, and of course the IMO is doing its job, but also in the Ocean Stewardship Coalition, we have been pressing on to make standards, to make references, to make ocean sustainability principles and blueprints for the industry to move ahead, awaiting and hopefully also pulling the regulatory framework in the same direction. But this is vital because investing in a vessel today, it will typically be operating for 20 to 30 years. So they need to have certainty for that. But now I'm turning to you, Rafaela, with Ambipar and the perspective of your group's worldwide, actually, activities. How do you see the partnership between the public sector, the private and third parties in the developing this?
Well, just to start, I just listen to music when you talk about companies that have difficulty to make inventories of greenhouse gases, a lot of intention and a lot of pressure. So this is the kind of environment that is very good for the private sector to operate, and hopefully we can operate that. Well, when we talk about, so not only climate change mitigation, emission mitigation, but any topic on sustainability, it's impossible to that companies can do everything by themselves. So partnerships, cooperation, it's basic. I think it's good that I'll bring some projects that we are doing, and I think this will emphasize how important it is for companies to collaborate with civil society and with the government. We started a project, as Rubens and Patricia said. So terminals and ports in Brazil are keen to reduce their emissions, to improve their results on climate change combat, but they don't know how to do it. So and we have this thing in Brazil of public ports and private ports. So the public ports, they cannot include a tax, for example, to compensate for emissions if they are not allowed by the public sector. So this well, it represents 98% of the ports of Brazil, could not be our clients. So it was really easy to focus on who we should talk to. Well, then we are talking to the government and trying to explain to them how important it is to allow environmental taxes or fees that they can charge, so that they can finance their emission reduction plans, so the pathway. But this is long term, so we know that this is not fast. But on the private sector, it was well received. But then it was really interesting that while we were talking to the ports and the terminals, they told us, well, actually, we have some clients that asked us for their emissions on their containers, on their what they have here in the ports that we operate, and they want us to reduce the emissions or compensate what we can do. So we had already then the client as a key actor to promote emission reduction or compensation in ports. And what we are doing now is establishing a fee, a voluntary fee, where companies can compensate their emissions. They're calculated through the inventory of greenhouse gases. So then we are connecting clients with the ports, and what in our view is that the ports and terminals are key actors because they integrate. So they're in the middle of the value chain. So we have the shipping companies, we have the transportation companies of the trucks in Brazil that we are using, and then those can go to the port and ask them to get further this compensation, and then once ports can be able to compensate the whole path of a whatever good that we're talking. And this is one thing that we are doing, and it's really interesting. A second project that we are doing on adaptation aspect, we are trying to, there was a very interesting study in Brazil of vulnerability of ports and terminals on climate change, but their methodologies considers data from the past. And we know that we have to think about the future and the scenarios that we are facing. So we made a partnership with a port, and now we establish a big working group that involves port, local authorities, as we're talking about disasters and things like that, so firefighters, police, etc. Then we have the regulatory agencies of the ports that is also involved, and we include in our group our response emergency staff, some experts in hydrology, in oceanology, etc. And then some people that are experts in our team on scenario planning, on data, on organizing, artificial intelligence and things that I don't understand. But we have everybody together because we need to understand, because our goal with this project is to build emergency response protocols that consider climate risks, but not based on past data, but on future scenarios. And we can just do that if we include all that expertise, all these views. I don't know how much time it will take for us to get to there, but we are working for 6 months now and discussing a lot, and we hope that next year we can start to bring the first results, and everybody will benefit from it. And this is the way that we think we have to work when we talk about climate change in maritime.
Thank you so much, Rafael. I think for your scenario planning, just to remind people the same that I usually do, today we are experiencing what is called a moderate or even slow economic growth in the world. It's a 3% GDP growth, approximately. That means that the global economy will have doubled in 23 years before 2050, and it will have quadrupled before 2075. So that just adds to your point, and it shows the scale of the challenge. So, on that note, turning to you, Ruth, what role do you see for LRF in capacity building and assisting and supporting building maritime competence and capacity, not least in the global south? And what are the main obstacles and trigger points?
Thank you, Sturla. When you were giving your introductory remarks earlier, you were kind enough to thank me. But when you're a funder, you fund people to do your mission for you. You know, I don't go out every day and change the world. I make decisions about giving money to people who share the values that we want to put out there, who want to to deliver our mission. And Lloyd's Register Foundation's mission is to engineer a safer world. And that's never been more important than in this energy transition. And there's never been more opportunity for the people of the world to get a secure economic development from this transition than now. So what we see, and what I want to thank you for, is in the UN Global Compact and in the local network that you can see that the value in our mission and that you want to do it. So that's the number one thing. It's not, when you're a funder, it's easy to take lots of thanks, but it's not necessary. We need people to do our work. So the second thing is about this economic opportunity, and it has to stick, and it has to be a new way of thinking about the way the world is wired, which is much more inclusive and equitable. And that is part of the foundation's thinking about locally led networks and locally led partnerships. Because it's no good for me and my colleagues in London to be making decisions about what is needed when we have no clue, we have no idea about the problems you have in Brazil. And your problems you have in Brazil, probably different from the problems that are in India or problems in Indonesia. So it's so important to have the local voices and to determine your own future. And so when we asked the Global Compact to find us some locations to pilot this idea in, that's what we did. And we found 7 locations, and Brazil is one, where there's an appetite in the private sector, an appetite to take advantage of this transition, to grow the economy, to do it in a sustainable and safe way, and where the government, can help, is it not getting in your way too much? It's some countries you don't want to be in because the government, you can't work with it. So we found 7 locations where there's this appetite in the private sector and where the governments are benign to a certain extent to that ambition from the private sector. Like I said, our mission in the foundation is engineering a safer world. And as Sturla said at the beginning, if it's not safe, it's not sustainable, right? Everyone has a right to feel safe and be safe. So as we grow out the economy in the most dangerous environment, the ocean industries are the most dangerous environments to be in. Somebody said last year that the ocean is the biggest employer in the world, but it doesn't have an HR department, right? So who do you go to when you want to complain about, the storminess and the hazards and the things that get thrown at you every day? There's no HR department. So it's our role as we grow out this economy to make those conditions good, to look after people, to make sure that local people are well looked after. So that's the why we're doing this. What we do see is important is and we call it South-to-South cooperation, but Brazil's not South. Maybe geographically it's South, but these kind of words. But actually, what it is, it's like to share with other countries who are in a similar position, maybe share the ambition that there is a dialogue that happens and that can be a shared experience and encouragement, just like we have here at COP. We all come together and we encourage each other to keep on the journey. So that's sharing of knowledge. And then the standards that you talked about, Rubens, that we can import those standards or grow our own standards that are important. And I always, I hear this word, we need to invite everyone to the table. But I kind of like you guys to build your own table, right? Because you don't need to be at a table which is set by other people. You need to set your own table, build your own table and, make your own future and support each other in doing that. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So in these, in the centres, what we're looking for is that the shared knowledge, there's a shared knowledge, a shared data between you, shared understanding of what works and what doesn't work, that, those kind of approaches, things won't work, you'll come across lots of obstacles. And then in the foundation, we can use kind of seed corn funding to support what you want. Once you've done your collection of pain, Patricia, and you'll come back to us and say, all right, here's where we think the biggest pains are. We can work creatively together to use the funding and the support that we can provide to unlock the pain. And help you draw down additional finance from elsewhere. So that's really where we see our role in the foundation. Thank you.
So thanks for that, Ruth. I think what you said about you have to build your own table or make your own or lay your own table. I think that's very important. But I think it also points to another point, and that is sort of the mutual exchange of competencies. And not only do we have to make country-specific and locally tailored solutions, but I also think that the feedback from this, both between the ocean stewardship centers in the global south itself, but also to the global north and other parts of the world, I think will be extremely important. So thank you so much for that, Ruth. Turning to you again, Patricia, couldn't you sort of briefly, I see that that time is running, as always, very fast, but briefly, you alluded to sort of international shipping being sort of an international, with very few Brazilian actors. But on the domestic side, what were the main findings of your report, and what potential do you see for cabotage and inland waterways in Brazil?
Yeah, two things. So, yes, the big vessels operating there are foreigners, and they're talking, for example, about certain fuels that can be found easier, maybe methanol, LNG, and all that discussion. But, for example, in Brazil, the cabotage transportation, they are discussing other issues. For example, in Brazil, we have already ethanol that is already used for other land transportation. And so there's a huge production and logistics in Brazil, and they are seeing the possibility to use inside Brazil ethanol. But at the same time, we have the same waters that circulate, as I used to say. We have the waterways and we have the maritime transportation. I would just say that we cannot separate that. Sometimes we are here just talking about the ocean and coastal transportation and crossing the huge oceans of the globe. But we have to see how it is connected to the businesses of inside. And talking about security, Ruth, I think that when it arrives the time, well, it has already arrived the time to build a safety culture with this new scenario, and talking about all the biofuels, regardless of they will be more used by the big vessels or like ethanol maybe in Brazil. We have to think of what is really safe for the workers, for the environment, and the laws must be the same. So I think that we cannot exactly separate these two environments. And just to conclude, I think we have, even like Ruth said now, we have to be careful even when separating the global south from the global north, because we're not talking just about geographies, especially addressing safety. We are in Dubai, and who are those who are there working at our safety? Are them from the global north or from the global south? Who will be these workers working in these big vessels from the companies from the global north? So we cannot address safety just with this vision of the geography. So this is very important to see how to integrate all this discussion, talking about safety, about the workers, and about these waters that in the end are the same, and the emissions, they go to the atmosphere. Okay, we can talk about the emissions of the maritime sector, talking about the ocean, but we are in the same house. We live in the same place.
Yeah. Thank you, Patricia. And I think that also, in addition to the important topics that you raised, I think that talking about emissions, I think it's important also to remember we're talking about emissions from shipping. But shipping is by far the most energy efficient mode of transportation. So in many countries, it will make perfect sense to have more shipping, decarbonized, but more shipping and mode shift from land to sea. The other is the diversity of shipping. We often talk about shipping as shipping. It's not, obviously. And for instance, deep sea shipping is facing a lot of other technical operational problems with fuel, for instance, than short sea shipping or inland waterways, where you can use everything from batteries to other fuel types. So back to you, Rubens. What are the main initiatives that you are working at the UN Global Compact Brazil now in this respect?
Yeah. Apart from the working group that we have developed like for 6 months, and the focus is on a green shipping and green ports. You also have another project that is running like for 2 years or 2 years and a half that is called Blue Keepers. Blue Keepers is a project that we want to reduce the plastic pollution in the ocean. So we have the scientific part of the blue keepers of this project, and we also have a more pragmatic part of the program. So we have local NGOs. This is where we have the partners. So we have local NGOs helping us to collect trashes on beaches. And with those materials and items that we are collecting, we will launch next year the first inventory of the things collected on the cities by the sea, for example. And so far we have collected more than 38,000 items. One of them, and it's very curious, and then I have to share with you, is the cotton swab, right? Yeah, cotton swab, right, guys? You know what is cotton swab, right? No, to clean the hair, yes. Cotton swab, yes. So, yeah, so we have found loads of them. And people were coming to ask us, well, but people are throwing cotton swabs on the beach, and we're like, no, this is not happening. Well, what is happening is people are throwing in toilets, and when they flush, the sanitation systems just flows into ocean, right? And the tides, they just come on and come off, and they bring all the cotton swabs into the sand, for example. So this is one of the amazing things that we are doing right there. Our solid waste team is working in this project. And yes, and we have now developed this working group that on the first phase was all related to what Patricia has found, all about the maritime industries and the port industries. But for next year on, we will work more on safety as well, but we will work on creating these standards, these business standards, and try to influence and persuade the Brazilian government to create an efficient law and efficient standards for the maritime and port industries.
Thanks a lot, Rubens. To your example with the ocean pollution, I can tell you, I was a couple of years ago, I was participating in a nationally televised ocean cleanup action. I mentioned that the other day. We were 30 divers in a Norwegian fjord. Norwegians like to pride themselves on the very pristine and clean fjords. 30 divers, 3 hours. We collected 3 metric tons of garbage from the seafloor. That was a very sobering moment, I can tell you. Okay. Huh?
You were with your brother, right?
Sorry?
You did this with your brother.
I don't have a brother, but I have a buddy, which you always have for safety reasons when you're diving.
I thought it was a brother.
Thank you. No. Okay, I'll turn to you, Rafael, and tag on with the same question that I posed to Rubens. Ambiparas is a prominent member of UNGC Brazil, and you have been actively engaged in the greening of shipping and topics like that. Could you say a few more words about how you are approaching and addressing climate mitigation policies and actions?
Yeah. Well, I think with the basics, so it's not how to go away from it, but we start inside and outside with our clients with inventory. So we have the greenhouse gas protocol that we use in Brazil, in other countries. So we understand what are the sources of emissions and where are the opportunities. And then with this, then we can start on planning and doing so. One thing that we are doing internally and externally is to establish some internal cost of carbon, because this helps a lot on stimulating investment, stimulating actions to reduce emissions. So just to have for you to have an idea, with this calculation that we did and the price that we want to charge internally, we have projects to achieve our mission for 2030 next year, because people want to be fast and reduce significantly their emissions. So this is what we are doing. We are also we have developed a decarbon department, so a vertical in the company, and we work on carbon credit projects, so establishing this, creating carbon credits, and then compensating this, helping companies to compensate. Our vision is that we have always to try to be zero emissions, first through compensation, and then with this internal carbon credit that with the price that we charge, then we can start to make investments and to help our clients to make their investments as well. In the shipping sector, we are helping companies to to fracture their emissions on the right what's the name? Well, the right metric where they can calculate how to compensate and how to compensate with clients. So, for example, we calculate emissions on days in the of a container in the terminal, days of shipping in the container. We do all these calculations. And one thing that's really good is that we include technology in this process, and we have automated systems that we can charge. So for kilos of carbon emission, not on tons, and we can make that on blockchain and give all the security to clients that they are really compensating the emissions that they generate, and we can provide all the data to show them that it's a rigorous calculus and that the carbon credit is compensated. So, and this is what we are doing, but I cannot avoid saying that the importance as well with the partnership with the Global Compact, because so we are ambassadors of the movements in the Global Compact. Yesterday we announced we are trying to make something new, so we have a naming right. So Ambipar in the strategy of Global Compact Brazil on the Ambition 2030. So we want to associate our name to the Global Compact because we share the same values, as Ruth said, so we have the same ideas, and we want society to understand that, and we want other companies to think about their investments on branding associated to causes associated to social and environmental challenges. So this is really relevant, and by doing that, we can support so the Global Compact, Rubens, the whole team, to develop more research, to create trainings, to develop good events that can help us to build relationships and to accelerate the space for us trying to deal with the challenge on climate change that we have.
Thank you, Rafael. I think that two things. One is, of course, it's music in the ear of an academically trained journal economist to hear how you are working to really make it profitable for business to be on the right side of not the history, but the future, more importantly. Secondly, also, I think you'll have a once-in-a-lifetime change to highlight Brazil's contributions in this space, because you are hosting the G20 meeting this year, which also has, and we will discuss this, of course, how to use that occasion also to highlight the Ocean 20 concept and take that onwards, not least in the perspective of the Global South. Now, Ruth, Patricia's report highlighted the limited or lack of awareness for training, development, education. What role do you see for LRF and yourself in capacity building and educational development?
Thanks, Sturla. Well, we're going to wait until we're told. By over the next 12 months, you'll be coming back to us with a list of, what is it? What's your plan? What's the Brazilian plan? And that will have within it capacity and training needs. Now, in the foundation, we're a relatively small foundation when you look at Bezos and other things. So we can't train the whole world, but we target our interventions at places which are scalable. So to give you some examples there, we supported the Just Transition Task Force, Maritime Just Transition Task Force, which we can provide the financial support to bring, to coordinate and convene and to make sure that there's a framework which can be taught out, a training framework to then roll out in that just transition. So that's one example of the kind of intervention that a foundation like ours can make. Another one is that we also fund scholars at the International Maritime Law Institute in Malta, which is part of the IMO. And when we fund scholars who go there, those scholars often go on to be the ministers or the heads of the judiciary system in their countries. And IMLI, it's called. IMLI can also put together specific courses which they can bring into your country to train up your judiciary, so to enable the enforcement. So not just the development of law, the adoption of different laws, but also the enforcement of those laws through the courts. And those sort of interventions are very important, and they're the kind of things that a foundation like ours can do, as well as also we can fund scholarship and seed sort of training and bursaries and those sort of things, but we would rely on partnerships to do that at anywhere near scale. So those are the kind of things, in the training environment we can do, Sturla.
Thanks, Ruth. And on that note also, let me say big thanks to you for supporting our Maritime Just Transition Task Force. And we are now also launching this training for decarbonization for seafarers, which is headed by Kjersti here. So any one of you who have questions about that could ask her, because this is very important, very tangible, on how to address this for the almost 2 million seafarers around the world who will be affected by this. So massive program and immensely important. I see that we are about to run out of time, and I also know that there is a party which will start in right after this. So I guess that sort of people are getting a bit impatient after a long day. But so I think I'll thank the panel so much and leave the final word to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Sturla. Thank you so much also for joining us today and talking about your experience. Just to say where we're going next on this. So over the next sort of 12 to 16 months, that you're going to be busy, in Brazil. But also we have ocean stewardship centres that are doing a similar exercise in India, in Bangladesh, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Philippines, and in Indonesia. So if anyone has local stakeholders or wants to be part of the locally led discussion, then do please get in touch. Get in touch with anyone on this panel, and we'll plug you into the right place. And if you're interested in your own countries or in your own networks in other locations, then it's not a limited club. What we're trying to do is to grow anyone who wants the opportunity to share and to do this in a sort of open innovation way together. So please do approach us for that. And then, I just want to thank everyone for leaning into this. It's very exciting. I'll give an example, just some feedback. When we met our Indian colleague back in New York Climate Week, he said, I don't know why we didn't do this before, right? We just kind of, if you work together and if you put a common agenda out, he said that in India, they've now been working on the common agenda around the ocean stewardship centres, and they've already gone to their government and said, look, this is our common goal. And their government, who is, a relatively rich government in that sense, they said, okay, we'll fund that, right? That seemed kind of easy to do. It may be that one's done, we don't have to do anything else there. But it's just about getting a common voice, working together, a common voice, and that will secure the funding. It's much easier to fund a big coalition of industry that know what they want to do and have the right principles and the right values in what they're doing. That becomes a no-brainer for the big funders out there. So thank you very much. Thank you for doing our work for us. And I've got the easy job of having our name on it. But thank you. Thank you, everyone.